Hello, everyone. It's me, Steven, and I'm joined by my co-host, Emily.
Hello.
That's the first time that I've said in many weeks joined by and not joined with. I did it. Everyone lost a bet. I win. I am not assigned
Damn
to
it.
win. I am not joined with Emily, though.
Not
that'd
since
be
the
kinda cool.
surgery, anyway.
Exactly. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Our music to come in this week is a little band called iFarm, which maybe a lot of you have never heard of, but I've known about them for actually a really long time, because at one point they were a local band in my...
Exactly 5,000 people out in the world at any given time always liked our band. It was never any fewer, which was great, gratifying, but it was never any more. Like usually, I think when you sell records or whatever, you expect to see some growth or some diminishing, but for us, it was always exactly the same. It was always exactly 5,000 of anything we produced, we would sell.
So you set the precedent for the Facebook friendship limit.
That is
exactly
correct. It was based
you
on
all were the prototype for that, managing that
yeah.
5,000.
I mean, it's complicated because our name was complicated, but yeah, it used to be one iFarm would be 5,000 people. Yeah.
it's a unit of universal measurement.
Impact.
So that was iFarm, and the voice you're hearing, the new voice on the podcast this week, is a gentleman and a friend who will become a friend of this show. I will very briefly introduce, and then I'll allow him to speak for a moment. A friend of mine, I can kind of say that.
Trial basis to becoming friends with the show.
You're under consideration for the moment.
I assumed that I was.
It's looking good, but don't push it.
So, official friend of the show, ladies and gentlemen, Arun Chaudhary of many fames. You may know him from such places as the band iFarm, as I mentioned. You may know him from such places as NYU film circles. You may know him from the new media team from the Barack Obama presidential campaign. You might know him from slumming around the White House as first videographer of the USA. Or maybe a couple of you know him as the digital creative director of Bernie 2016.
Even that was 4 years ago. Oh my God.
Ladies, that was 4 years ago.
Oh my God,
so
4 whole years ago.
We are all very old. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Arun. We've got him on the show. I've worked so hard to get he and Emily scheduled because they are both... Oh, so it's our great pleasure. Y'all have both been busy. I mean, we've all been busy, but I've been kind of trying to get this show set up because I want to talk to y'all about your unique perspectives within this movement.
And it was also time zones, because I think Emily was in Nevada at the same time as I was in Italy, and with you in the middle, it was definitely not easy to coordinate.
Yep. That was me in New York trying to reach and just everything. I mean, first order of business, I guess, for fans of the show here is Emily has a little announcement to make about her professional life, which has contributed to her very, very busy schedule, which has contributed to our struggle to get together for podcasts. Emily, would you like to just take it away and share with our listenership the recent news for you?
Sure. Yes, the recent development is that I was brought on board with the advanced team for Bernie 2020. So I am currently touring the country, helping to throw those incredible events that are being so well attended. So it's been a very enlightening and stressful and packed and exciting 10 days. I don't even remember how long I've been on now, but it's all blurring together. But yeah, it's been a wild ride for sure, and definitely has complicated my ability to do the normal things that I like to do with my life, like come on here and talk to Steven and other lovely people.
Exactly. And I'm thankful that now that you've carved out a sense of normalcy again in life, that you are back on the show.
Normalcy.
Yeah, right.
I was doing quotes. Because oh, I see. You're doing air quotes over there. Yeah. Well, you lucked out because this event is probably one of the more quiet ones that I've done so far, and they're warning the noobs not to get used to this because it's usually pretty hairy. But yeah, it's where I'm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina right now. I can
Ugh.
literally hear the ocean from my hotel room.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make
So
that
fun.
noise.
And
Voters everywhere is important. Everywhere is good. It's just
yep,
it's a certain
it's
part
a
of the
smaller
world.
area. Yeah, it's not Las Vegas, shall we say? Which
No, but
is
it's not totally dissimilar. That was why I made that noise. Like Myrtle Beach, that whole area just has a little bit of that kind of just like
it has the most
That little crazy,
picturesque
sexy
the town
vibe.
that
like
mini golf
feeling
ate
to
kind of
it.
energy to it.
It's really quite. I've
Hmm.
never been in South Carolina before, and this has. I don't know. I feel like it's a setting for a movie or something because there's these. There's like a Ferris wheel right outside my hotel, and there's some
Big
like old
strip energy.
rides and stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yep.
it
yeah, yeah,
feels
yeah.
very. The vibe is
Carney.
very
There's a lot of kind of carny
exciting.
going on.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's right on the water, and there's a boardwalk, and I don't know. It feels like it's the set for a movie or a novel, maybe a murder mystery or something like that. I don't know.
We're gonna lose
I'm
her to the
liking it.
carnival. She's
The
gonna be
power's
running
run
that
out. The
Ferris
title
I've
wheel.
came
already
back
run
on.
away to join the
There
circus.
was a
That's what
press
this
defense
is.
staffer
That
missing.
was the next joke. Definitely. Nice,
Yeah.
nice. So yeah, you've got one circus already to manage. Wow. So, Run, if you don't mind, would you catch us up on? Well, of course, I guess maybe we should briefly describe your political career. You work with a company called Revolution Messaging, right? I mean, you guys kind of do a lot of.
Currently, I am in it with a group called Committee, and when I say group, it's actually just me and one other person. We spun off of Revolution Messaging, which is spun down
Oh, cool. Okay. Okay.
last
Interesting.
fall, and it's the same mission in that we're a political communications company, which means we take and help develop messages and make them into narratives, and then decide what content should be made from those narratives, and then make that content.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so yeah, the same kind of same well, not the same kind exactly, but a new venture. That's very cool. That's led you to some very interesting and diverse regions lately. I know I mean,
Mm.
I've been following your work for a handful of years, and across that few years or so, you've been all over the globe working with different coalitions, different campaigns, to different, sorts of ends and results. Would you mind briefly describing the
No, not
international
at
work that
all.
you've
No,
done?
thank you for the opportunity to. Like committee is committed. Committee is committed. This is already working. Great.
That's nice.
To a global perspective on movement politics, and that is just that these things don't happen in isolation. And in fact, when you look at like the right wing kind of movement across the globe, it doesn't really originate in the US as much as it originates in Europe and comes across the oceans to us. And so a lot of what I've been doing with Committee has been working in places like Italy, working in places like the UK, working in places like Germany that are much closer to kind of the front lines of the reverse 1848 phenomenon we're living through with this kind of rise of nativism. And actually,
Yeah.
another place that I've been lucky enough to work, and I will say actually successfully, we just had an election in Emilia Romagna, Italy, where Salvini, who is the far right kind of potential strongman there, was really kind of served a punch in the nose by bringing out a lot of marginal voters and making it happen. It might sound familiar. That's exactly the same kind of coalition that's making Bernie happen.
Nice.
But actually, another place we're working in that's very interesting is Kosovo, where Vetvendoja, which is the Albanian word for self determination, the Vetvendoja party has actually formed a government. And there you see progressive politics mixed with a little bit of kind of national liberation language. And the kind of result of that does seem to be like popular movements that bring people who normally would be attracted to center and far right politics to the left because they were always interested in the kind of economic aspects of it and are now actually being turned on to more of the social justice aspects of it. So I think there's lessons there, not just for Europe, but for the United States of who and how to reach out to. And I guess the answer to that is everyone.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Now, so as far as what you've observed globally with this sort of like right populism or this potential new left populism, uh, going from Brexit and through more recent European examples that you might be able to cite, where do you see the populist trend going in Europe? And back to your comment about Europe kind of being a little bit ahead of or certain areas of Europe, showing us things that we will later um, maybe realize or we'll see happen here in the States a little bit later. Would you mind speaking to that phenomenon briefly? Because I'm very interested in how
Yeah, I
you've
mean,
seen
I
that
think
play out.
there's no way that Trump wins without the kind of headwinds of Brexit igniting people's imagination about what's possible. And I actually think even if you're talking about it in terms of like weather patterns, I think that you can make a good analogy. I think what's happening is there's two different kind of storm fronts of the far right. One, let's say, is blowing in from the east, kind of old fashioned, father and son. I use that gender advisedly, like passed down, traditional, organized, potluck
Hmm.
dinners, this kind of thing. The other one comes in from places like California. It's like Milo. It's, are we fascist? We're not sure. It's Pepe the Frog. It's like we're just having fun. It's
Yeah,
all a joke. Maybe we're not totally joking. Maybe immigrants are bad. Like
yeah,
it's all very tongue in cheek. And those two
Ironic
things on
fascism.
their own are very manageable, like, but when they come together, they can really cause some really heady concoctions. And that's what you see across the center of Europe. You see these two
yeah,
storm fronts come together and the kind of weather patterns be bizarre. You have Denmark, where a left wing government is like cracking down on immigration. You have the opposite happening in Sweden, which is right next door and is basically the same place. And,
yeah,
and then in Italy, which is why Italy is so important, you have Salvini, who is like a perfect combination of both these two forces put together in one person. He's kind of
wow,
half angry Nixonian dad, comes home after work, has a couple drinks, yells at the kids, and goes to bed. And he's
right,
also like guy in a bathing suit who has a good time, like
right,
at a bar in Sicily. So
sure,
that's why some of these folks are so dangerous, is that they're combinations of these things, and that's what's sort of not happening in America as much. The connection between those two movements is not happening as part of the Trump coalition, which is sort of a more traditional Nixonian coalition
right,
plus some sort of angry folks. I will say, paradoxically, perhaps one of the things what's protected the U.S. from kind of accelerating down the right wing nativist thing as quickly as some other countries is the fact that we have such a low voter turnout. Because in
yeah,
other countries,
Right.
they have this much higher voter turnout. And so there is this bigger persuadable chunk of folks that you can
yeah.
talk to.
Do you think
And
that that's partially responsible for the fact of us being behind on these trends as well? As it turn out so low that it's like more
yeah,
of a delay period
we
there
are
between?
super advanced, and we employ, I think, some of the best political techniques in the world, because we spend so much money on our elections, and because we spend so much time on them. But it's definitely distorted by the fact that every digital program, every field program, every program seemingly is aimed at turning out likely Democratic voters, because it's how you win these primaries. And it's just not a way to bring in new people into the process in a really effective way, or in fact at all. And so we're constantly sort of leaving people out in the cold who need a little more persuasion to come in. I
Yeah,
think, I can't tell you, I'm not in the room with him, but I think Brad Parscale from the Trump campaign, I think what he's spending that $30 million Facebook a month or whatever ungodly sum they're spending on is making new voters out of non-voters for Trump.
right.
I think they're pretty
Right.
aware that they've let down some of their electorate in terms of the things that they've done. Trade deals hadn't really stopped the wars, etc. But I think they can also bank on the fact that the greatest untapped resource in America is just more voters. This was
Yeah.
Yeah,
sort of the genius of Karl Rove, and in fact, maybe even the genius of Barack Obama, is to just go find new voters when you need to make new voters.
right.
And I would say
Because
Obama '08, not Obama '12, which was kind of the first
Yeah.
kind of expression of what a pure turnout election would look like. And I think when you look at the fracture lines, maybe this is going too far on a tangent and come back later, but when you look at the fracture lines of what went wrong in Hillary 2016, I think you can see a lot of those problems in Obama 2012. And for folks like us who are really interested in Bernie Sanders becoming the next president, I think we can also learn lessons from what didn't work in 2012 and 2016, and
Hmm.
that were sort of susceptible to, especially people like me who were on the campaign in 2016, is to run things like a re-elect when the person's not even the position. You know, that's sort of
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
like often when you run things like that, you just end up relying on the personality to take you over the top, and that works when it works, and it doesn't work when it doesn't work.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting to see, to hear. The most striking thing for me there is the phenomenon of creating new voters is definitely very profound and very pertinent to, I think, Trump's. As you mentioned, he's disenfranchised a hunk of his electorate just on the same sheer goofiness that has endeared a very large, significant portion of his electorate and possibly galvanized them. He has definitely turned off some folks, but I think he is doing really well to continue to create new voters, as the early
Mm-hmm.
Obama campaign did, which, as we all know, a vote is a vote, and you can either waste weeks, months, years trying to persuade the politically interested and the politically sophisticated voters, or you can, speak a simple common language. And I think we're almost seeing that in a
And I'm
bit
going to jump
with
in
the.
there and just be
Go ahead,
nitpicky about
please,
this.
please, please.
Like, I would not call people politically sophisticated versus not politically sophisticated. Some of the most politically sophisticated people I know do not vote
Very
Okay,
because
true.
they think
okay,
it's bullshit, because why would they bother? Blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of
right,
hard to argue with them sometimes. And actually, a lot of people who do vote are just, it's like sports to them. They're all, like, I say this lovingly as an independent voter.
for sure.
Like, we're on a team, we're Democrats, our symbol's the
Hmm.
donkey, we wear these hats at the convention. Like, everybody
Blue,
wants you to be on some team. And like, if you
yeah,
don't want to be on that team, that doesn't work. But if you do want to be on that team, then it's not like you're like a sophisticated voter. You're just part of the team.
Well, it's
yeah.
We need,
I
identity.
think I
yeah,
use
we need
that
people who
term.
aren't part of the team to want to vote for the person, even if they don't want to join the team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that's totally right. I didn't even mean that the way I said it. I think I was gearing toward the term non-sophisticate to describe the opposite
No, no, no. Yeah,
phenomenon, and
I
I
don't think
reached for it.
any prejudice on your part, but I think it
Sure.
demonstrates that we're always looking in the wrong places. We're like, oh, we need to hit low information people with simple things so that maybe they'll vote, because if they know what's good for them, they'll vote. And actually, the folks who aren't voting are smarter than the people who you're already getting to vote, and you're going to have to make a
Sure.
better argument to make them come out.
Yeah.
And that's very, very rarely done. Uh,
Especially for the independents, as opposed to just people who aren't particularly politically aligned one way or the other, maybe because they're
totally.
disenfranchised or disillusioned with the system. But I got a lot of independents actually when I was out canvassing in Iowa who were very aware, like you're saying, um, followed politics, but remained, uncommitted or just said they weren't going to vote because they had, essentially assessed the whole situation and said, this isn't worth my time. Which it's interesting talking to those people. Like I come from a background that's a little bit different than a lot of people in the Democratic Party.
Hmm.
Um, I was raised nominally conservative, but kind of like what you're saying. It's just a team thing. It's kind of like, well, we root for the Cubs and we vote Republican, and it's about as far as it goes. Not really particularly invested in any particular policies per se. It becomes a
Right, not
just part of
ideology.
just one piece of the tapestry of your identity, kind of in the background. But I never voted Democrat until Bernie Sanders, and I don't know that I would. I tend to think of myself a little bit more as an independent, although I would vote for many Democrats over the alternative, of course. But so I had to, it was interesting talking to those people because I was able to kind of say, look, I get where you're coming from. Um, the you're right to be disillusioned with the system as it stands. And the reason I'm out here, the reason I drove here from Texas to do this, to knock on your door in the cold, is because we are looking at a situation that is historically unprecedented. And I promise you, it is worth your time to look into this and
Yeah.
to think about being
Totally,
involved in what's happening here.
Isn't
totally.
that
If
the
you're gonna
best
have
when
that
somebody answers their door and they're like, "Oh man, I'm making eggs. Can you hang out?" And you're like, "Sure, no problem. I've driven 8 hours. Go ahead, just please go ahead." And I mean,
Yeah,
I love people and I understand the inconvenience of having your door knocked, but
yeah.
yeah, that is
I will
a
say I
good
prefer
equalizer line.
canvassing in the warmer months when someone's not peering at me around their door, which they'd very much like to close so they can be warm again. Because like it's hard having a conversation with someone in those circumstances. But
Of
totally.
course. speaking of, let's round this thing back to Bernie 2020. We've got a 2016 staffer who was, on the road watching all the cool shit unfold. And now we've got a 2020 staffer. It was like a passing of the torch symbolically here between you guys on the road
Woohoo!
with Dad. And you're both great, amazing people. And Run, you just had a little little high school reunion, get the band back together kind of thing because you
Yeah,
just did
yeah,
the event in
ran
Texas.
around a rally.
Your
My
pictures were
happy face.
sick. There's something about the Arun touch with the camera. I don't know what it is. Not to
I
just be
take
a
dirty
fanboy here.
photographs, is what it is. And so as cameras get cleaner and cleaner and crisper, I take grainier and flairier stuff. And so it even just to make it
Nice.
stand out. And the
You
only reason
damn
I
old
mention
punk
this is
rocker.
all your listeners should know this is a good Instagram strategy generally.
It's
That's
true now that
awesome.
you
Well,
mention it.
everyone, you can bill all of our listeners because that is very invaluable advice for sure. And I remember you spoke to this when I brought you up in, I don't know, like 2017, March of 2017 for our
Mm-hmm.
Binghamton conference, where the now very, very, very rock star famous Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez Facebook posted about your specific
And we've
part.
still never met. It's really a shame. Yeah.
I hate the fact that y'all haven't met because that's so crazy. Because I actually introed you that morning, hungover as fuck. Because I had just met all these Naipan people, and like all the young people were like, "Hey, we've only seen each other on Zoom. Let's like drink scotch until until it's 4 a.m." And I was like, "Great idea, everybody! I'm the sole point person for tomorrow. I've got to meet the janitor at Binghamton High School at 6 a.m. to get the keys. Like, what could possibly go wrong?" Anyway, long story very much shorter. That was a cool time and that was neat. But I remember during that talk, you spoke about the value of grittiness and the sort of just corniness of the very high quality, very flat, very non-dynamic iPhone sort of photos, and the fact that y'all would overexpose stuff intentionally to add a little grit and a little grain. And that was cool. And I think that really showed and represented a lot of the aesthetic of the campaign in 2016, which was, as we all saw, in a lot of the articles, some of which were largely about yourself and your involvement around that. It was the punk rock campaign. It was a campaign of artists. It was a campaign of, more artistically inclined people who
There was a
were.
lot of DIY, both aesthetic and ethos.
Yeah.
That's
Can you speak
both.
to that?
That was both a great thing about 2016, and also, in the end, can be limiting as you're trying to scale up and do things in a national way.
Sure. And could you give an example of that? Because that's got my interest peaked.
Oh yeah, I mean, like there were times where I was even able to like go and speak individually to large groups of video volunteers and be like, this is what we should all do, and kind of walk people halfway down and then let them like their own creativity go wild. And that kind of like half message discipline from the campaign and half creative grassroots thing that was like so magic and worked so well in certain times and places
Yeah.
isn't something that you can make magically happen in Arkansas and Kentucky and South Dakota on the same day. Like,
Right.
although it
Right.
is something you can do in Iowa, in New Hampshire, in California, and in New York,
Yep.
each of those pairs for different reasons.
Yep.
And so that's one. But I think in general, this was a less of a David and Goliath situation, which was the kind of, song that we were playing
Right.
last time, and is much more like a kind of, like melee free for all, that you do want to just sort of have that like iron organization, discipline, we're big, we're bad, we can do things
Yeah.
attitude,
More an
and
insurgent
have that on
army this time around.
display. Yeah. Like we happen to, like it's just no one can afford not to look super professional at all times, especially when it comes to road aesthetics and the stuff that Emily's doing, because the
Oh
press are
yeah.
there and they're filming it and they will talk about it. They would
Yep.
love to talk about
Absolutely.
Hmm. We have people filming the filming, and it's like, yeah, it's a very, very tightly run ship.
it. Hey, let me ask you a
Which,
question, Emily.
sure.
Are there trackers at this point in the campaign still? Are the other campaigns bothering, or because the press is with everyone, are they not? Like, are there people you recognize from other campaigns who are like filming your campaign consistently, your events?
Oh, I mean, I probably can't speak to that, both because I'm too new to the scene to have been able to, start to pick out the same
Recognize
faces
those
and stuff.
faces. Yeah.
Yeah, and also just probably the capacity that I'm working in at the moment. That might be something the crowd or the press people might be better at
Totally. The press
noticing.
people would know. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, at the moment I'm on. I think I'm allowed to say I'm on motorcade. So
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
yeah, it's kind of wild. The
It's
funny
lit.
thing is, I went from being a rideshare driver in Austin, Texas,
Oh yeah.
to motorcade for Bernie Sanders,
You're
which
gonna
is
write a book.
very funny.
It's gonna be
There's a sense of
amazing.
irony here, especially the other
Yeah.
day when I had to run and grab food for certain VIPs, and it's like, oh, I was doing Uber Eats 2 months ago, and about the same now. It's just for different people,
Right.
But
Different perspective, different
um,
stakes.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
motorcade's wild. All the crazy things happen in motorcades. People have no idea.
a little bit. Yep.
I've followed a couple wild tales from the road through my friend here so far. I mean, not just simple logistical facts can become absolute terror
Oh yeah, because
nightmares.
I mean,
You
I
know.
think the pressure once you're because everything is scheduled so tightly, the down to the minute, we're just squeezing every little usable minute out of the day. So, you can't screw things up. A wrong turn or running into traffic you didn't adequately prepare for or spot coming, all that kind of a thing.
Yep.
These add up, and
But now
you
run
just
that up against a 4-person team who probably has $50,000 of audio video equipment on them and are
yep.
trying to like load it and unload it safely out of like vans.
Oh yeah.
Like so that urgency runs up against it, and it's just funny when those two things collide. So
Yeah.
Oh
like
yeah.
we've been in motorcades where like the vans were leaving and like our equipment's literally falling out the back and we're holding it from the inside,
No.
invariably while you're doing this someone from behind calls and they're like, hey, you know that the door's open, and you're like, yes, we are
Yeah,
I
we're
can
in
all
there.
feel the
aware.
I'm
anxiety.
in there.
We
I
are
can
The
all
feel the
aware that
sympathetic
it's
wind.
open, but
anxiety.
thank you for calling, we appreciate that.
Thank you for
And also I
calling.
would say once in 2008 with Obama, and I cannot remember the town, but and this is we had a motorcade very tightly packed, have to back up all of a sudden, and we weren't totally paying attention as much, and rolled over a duffel bag full of cameras, and the
Oh.
Oh my
sound
God.
that like a duffel bag of cameras makes when being crushed is a very
Haunts your
specific kind
dreams.
of electronics with a little bit of glass.
Yeah.
No.
Little
It's a
metal
very
glass.
interesting noise.
Oh
Oof.
God.
Just pulverized 3 cameras. It was an intense moment.
There was
Oh
probably more
my God.
cameras lost in that incident than I will ever own of in value.
I can't even
I can't even
imagine.
imagine. High quality shit.
It was a tough
Not
one.
just the material waste, but just that big an interruption while the team tries to replace that equipment, and the time that they're losing.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
stressing me
We
out
only
just
missed
thinking
one
about it.
event though. We were back.
Okay, flash question. What is both of y'all's of all time favorite Bernie Sanders meme of any kind?
Oh God, you're gonna put me on the spot like
Emily,
that. There's so many good ones.
double on the spot, unless Arun wants to jump in with his.
I mean,
I
I'm
can
just
buy
gonna
you
have to narrow it
time.
down to very recent. Oh, you want to buy me time? Go for it.
I really liked, and it's not just one meme; it's like a group of them. But I really liked
Perfect.
the Burned in DC, which was like they would take like punk rock sayings and just or lyrics and distribute them to
Oh
Bernie.
yes, yes.
And I thought this was really good. And then there
Yeah.
was just recently
I
a
remember
crossover
those.
meme between the I Am Asking You for and the kind of punk rock ethos. And
Oh,
so
there
the
was,
two
yes.
things combined to make one beautiful meme that's the Bernie asking for things, but he's wearing the suicidal tendencies hat and he's asking for just a Pepsi, just one Pepsi.
Just one
Yeah.
Pepsi.
And that is my favorite Bernie meme.
That is outstanding. That's great. I saw the man, I really saw the I'm now asking get crazy with the music aesthetic. There was a Bernie with like stretched ears and like
Oh, I
good
saw that
Charlotte
one. Yeah.
like eye tattoos. Um the one I saw that was really funny, it's kind of like maybe not the most appropriate, but it was
Oh.
it was Oh God, now I can't remember. You know what? If I can't remember the tagline and it's inappropriate, I'm not going to say it because it's not going to be funny. It's just going to be totally whack. So forget it. But that was an incredible line of memeage, and that's the great thing about any meme. But of course, Bernie memes is the way they like transmutate, and you can get somewhere totally crazy from
Ah,
pretty
yes, the
distant
layers of
beginnings.
the increasingly Dadaist meme
So what
culture
about
that
you, Emily?
accumulate.
You've had a minute to
Oh,
think
I
on
don't
it.
know.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
bought
that
you
never
some.
helps. I mean, the first thing that popped into my head was the endless permutations of the asking you for financial support meme, but y'all brought that up, so um
Oh,
I'm trying to think because like this goes back years now. The dank meme stash, becoming
I
part of
also
history.
really enjoy the Bernie Cat crossover with the little salami.
Little
mhm.
salami, yes,
Little,
yes,
and you
that was pretty
have
great.
to say little salami. Nobody says it
It's not a
anymore.
little salami; it's little salami.
It's little salami. That was
Please
so important to me.
celebrate.
And then like 80% of the memes
I
didn't have
know,
it, and I was like, you gotta hook it. Like if you don't hook it, and the hook's out there, you're losing me. But
I know.
yes, little
I'm
salami.
I'm trying
Thank
to
y'all for
think
being
like
proper on that.
the the problem with me is if you ask me my favorite thing of any given category, I'm not going to give you the cool answer. I'm
Right,
always going
me
to come up
too.
with something really lame that I just like for some weird nostalgic reason of my own, and it's just why I don't like these questions. But like now that I'm see the sort of the month when I kind of really got into Bernie, and I think that was like the month that the dank meme stash kind of started to hit like some notoriety, and I just remember laughing my ass off at you remember that really dumb thing that was popular for like 5 minutes, the damn Daniel
Of course, my
Vine, I
cat's
think it
name is
was.
Hmm.
Daniel. Well, I still give him
Oh
a damn
God,
Daniel here and
yeah.
there.
Well, somebody took that picture of Bernie getting arrested, in which he is literally wearing white shoes, and they just wrote "Damn
Oh my
Bernie,"
gosh,
backheaded again with the white bands, and I lost. I don't know why. I was
That's
already kind of in
good.
a good mood that month because I don't know. I was just really getting into all of it, and it was kind of lifting my mood, and
it
just the
hits you just right.
camaraderie that was developing on the internet, and it all just came together, and it made me laugh so hard every time I saw that thing. It wasn't even that funny, but
So here's a question for a run. What's your of all time favorite? You didn't have to be on it. You don't even have to be alive for it. What's your favorite? But you can't say something like the French Revolution. What's your favorite political campaign?
always say the French Revolution.
Well, I mean, the French Revolution was the first kind of politically like campaign to run by political operatives, but I can
Well,
stick to
actually,
America. Well, actually, and say, "Oh man, I'm actually the first person," and I can't remember the name of it. I can't remember if it's Harrison or Cleveland. I think it's one of them. But the first front porch campaign, I think it's 1880. I shouldn't.
Mm,
I don't. I mean, I'm on a computer. I
mm,
should probably just look this up, so I don't embarrass myself.
feel free to. Yeah, no, that's
Front
fine. We
porch
encourage. We
campaign. But
encourage.
like people think about it when you talk about it like it's some kind of lazy thing. You know,
Yeah.
oh, the one guy ran around and the other person um first front porch campaign. The other person like ran around energetically, but that's not true. That's not what it was. It was that um it was McKinley and Harding. No, there was one before that. But during the first one, the idea was that one person was making a stump speech all over the country that was the same and wanted as many people to hear it as possible.
Yeah.
The
right.
other was the front porch campaign, and the idea was that you would every day have something new to say and just gather people who transmit the news to you so that you could come out and keep unrolling new policies about new things constantly.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
I think that tension sort of still exists. And not to like start a huge thing that we can't solve here now, but I do think it's some of the tension between media and field.
Hmm.
And I do think when you think about it from the way that I just said it, it makes the media part sound less obviously distasteful, which sort of the popular
Right.
fetish for kind of door knocking has rendered.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah,
I
I mean, I
say
think.
cynically sometimes, if knocking on doors was so great, Coca-Cola would sell soda that way.
Well, but I do think that there is something to be said for the resurgence of some of these traditional methods of campaigning, if only because of the sort of this wave we're seeing of people becoming, more and more turning off mainstream media, and this growing sense of it being dishonest, of it being bought, as people are beginning to have their consciousness raised a little bit more about,
No,
yeah,
for
who is
sure.
paying for all
Uh,
of this stuff,
and
and
I'm not for getting rid of
what are
one
they
or
getting
the
out of
other.
it? And yeah, no, I think
I'm for
as
joining
in
them
activism, I
together.
think a diversity of tactics is always what's going to win the day,
Yeah.
and there is, there's a
And
time and
right
a
now the
place where each
bell has
approach is
just
going to be
swung.
effective.
The bell has just swung the other direction, where you're like, people tell you their voter contact for Iowa, for instance, and you're like, well, if even remotely those people who you voter contacted all voted for Bernie, then he would have won by a zillion points instead of just by a handful. And so like sometimes I don't know, it's like it's so valuable because it's points you can't get any other way, exactly as you say. But I feel like every, I don't know, decade in politics, like the bell swings the other way, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, all mass media, and then everyone's like, oh, all field. And can't we all just eat a healthy diet?
That's the
Right?
thing,
That would
right?
be
It's the
so
balance
good.
that's going to be the yeah, because you're right. There are purposes for both that neither is going to serve. At the same time, I'm hearing from people here on the ground. When we even just from the staff at these venues when we're coordinating with them, we're hearing that these people are just so sick and tired of the ads that we've just hit a point of saturation where most people are just like pleading to, see
Oh
anything
yeah,
else
yeah,
on
yeah,
TV
yeah.
but these
No, and I
political
think
ads.
using, let's be totally clear, I think like television ads are totally a huge waste of money and possibly the least effective way to get your message, the most expensive and least effective way to get your message out through mass media. And that we have to rely on all these other things, whether it's getting your own
And
material
yet,
on the news, which
I
for
can think
its
of
own
no
finds
other
so
reason
hard, or
for Mike
using the internet.
Bloomberg to have shot upwards. From 3 months ago, he
Yeah,
was the
no, but it's not
candidate
just
with the
television.
highest negatives. And it's not
It's
like
also
his
radio
numbers went
and
up because
digital.
of, his
No, totally.
scintillating
Advertising works.
personality or, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it
Again,
can
to
be
use a
hard
Coke
to,
analogy, if you touch someone 7 times, they'll buy the can of Coke.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and he is, and he's very skillfully inserting his television presence. I have friends from all over the country texting me about what they're seeing.
Hmm.
I live in Texas, y'all. It is non-stop. Not number
Oh,
one,
you
Right.
live
like
there.
from everybody, but from Bloomberg, like super crazy.
Yeah.
I'm hearing the same everywhere. Everyone's really sick and tired of seeing Mike Bloomberg.
Yeah, you
I
both
feel
live in
like I
Texas.
have to be careful what I say about people, but since Bernie's going pretty hard after Mike Bloomberg, I don't think I've crossed any lines yet.
Yeah.
No, no, no. You're doing
How
fine.
far do you guys live from each other? Because Emily, you live
I live
what,
in
near Austin?
Austin.
I
In
live in
Austin.
Houston, so we're a couple hours.
Yeah,
Nice.
It's
not
Cool.
not
too
far.
far.
Awesome. At this time, I think we're going to
Little
bring
farther.
Lily on. We have Lily here to join us. So, Lily, are you there?
Hey guys,
Hey,
Hey,
Lily, what's up?
Lily.
how's it going?
It's
Great.
good.
Good to have
Have
you
you
on.
back on?
Thanks for being our first returning guest
Of
for a
course.
5-episode show. Not too bad. You're a definite friend of the show. I say that with no apprehension. And now we know we have two friends of the show because Arun has said he's a friend of the show as well. Emily, we are just making friends here.
No, but
Your
I
We have
mean,
five
you
certificates
couldn't
members.
and
say no
badges
to
should be
me.
arriving in the mail within 6 to 8 business
Um,
weeks.
I need my liberal participation trophy.
Facebook will
Mm.
That's right.
also be awarding top fan badges to everyone who's on
Ah,
the call.
yes. Look out for those.
So thanks for joining us. Lily, you're on the call with Arun. Arun Chaudhary's on the call with us, everyone. Anyone who's tuning into the last part of this and didn't hear our beginning introduction. Lily, would you mind quickly giving us an intro on yourself, where you're at, where you're coming to us from, what you're doing there, and sort of your history to bring you into the Bernie movement, if you could?
Yeah, so I'm currently in the Bay Area. I go to school out here, but I'm originally from Oklahoma, which was where I got into the Bernie movement back in 2015. I couldn't vote then, I wasn't old enough. So I've just been a volunteer since then, canvassing, phone calls, text banking, went to Iowa, met Emily, had a great time there, was precinct
So cool.
captain.
So
But
jealous.
yeah, now I'm back here in Berkeley, SF Bay Area, canvassing every weekend.
Tight. That's awesome. Yeah,
A
I've been
hero.
following your stuff, your stories online and stuff. Very cool. That rally you were at kind of looked like it was like half indoor, outdoor. I don't know if there was cover over, but it was like a lot of
Oh,
sunlight.
yeah, the Richmond rally. So it was in this place called the Craneway Pavilion. I mean, it's like floor to ceiling, like glass, but there were
Wow.
6 or 7 thousand people inside and a whole nother 3 or 4 thousand outside watching this happen.
Wow.
Man.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, as you know, Arun was on the road with the campaign, taking pictures and making videos and stuff in 2016. Emily's out there now. Lily, I know you had I think a question or two for Arun.
Okay.
If you don't mind, and Arun doesn't mind entertaining that, take it away, Lily, if you would.
Yeah. So I just want to say, Steve showed me some of your music, and I think it's awesome. So
Oh, thank
punk is
you.
actually what got me into politics when I was in Oklahoma, and I kind of had like I think we all with like our favorite
Yeah, are
band.
you in Tulsa?
Yeah, I was in Tulsa.
Tulsa's got a good punk scene.
Yeah, we do. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got involved in that. My sister took me to my first concert when I was 11 or 12, and I kind of had like a moment where I was like, "Oh my gosh, I love this. I love the energy and this music and this scene." And I kind of had a similar moment like that when I got politically active, and I was wondering if you had a specific moment that got you involved with politics and specifically politics with your music.
You know, in between kind of really being focused on like DIY punk rock and then being focused on like the political kind of media stuff, I was, in film school and worried a lot about like the film festival scene and like indie film world and the kind of politics of all of it. And actually, I think it's the politics are so raw it's even more political than politics. So there was something that felt like really familiar and amazing, and that same kind of energy you're talking about. Coming into politics for the Obama campaign 2008 and just making everything myself. And if I didn't have a graphic, I would just figure it out. And if I didn't have a thing, I would just figure it out. And it kind of had this scrappy, awesome DIY, both aesthetic and execution to it that like I really liked. And I feel like we took that to the
Yes.
next level in 2016 on Bernie by actually empowering. This is what we were talking about before, y'all. Like empowering other people to make their own stuff. And it just really did feel like DIY punk, challenging each other to make better things ourselves. Uh, and yeah, obviously the Bernie movement is so much about Bernie and his policies and the 40 years of kind of incorruptibility he's bringing to the table. But the look and feel of the movement has very little to do with him. I mean, we know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with the kind of collision of all of this energy and all these different people who are coming together to support him. And I think that's what's most exciting about the kind of aesthetic of the Bernie thing. And I agree with you that there are more than faint echoes of punk rock in it. And I think if we all were in a room together and raised our hands, there would be a lot more of us than people think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
Yeah,
No, I
it's
agree.
At the rally in Richmond, they had bands playing, and the people next to me were all like metalheads and punk rockers, and they were wearing like the Black Flag mixed with Bernie shirts and like the
Yup.
Rage Against the Machine ones.
it's a great
Like
shirt.
this energy is the same energy that I felt the first time I went to a concert, the first time I crowd surfed or was in a mosh pit. It's intense, but a good intense.
And that picture last week of Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth wearing the Black Flag Bernie t-shirt is
Mm-hmm.
Too
by
good.
far one of the most iconic things in 2020 I have seen.
Yeah, that's totally
Yeah.
was amazing.
Might be up
that
there
blew
with the
me
photo
away.
of Pussy Riot with Bernie.
Oh my gosh, I'm
Totally.
seeing
Yeah,
them
that ain't
next
bad.
month here. I'm going just because I can wear my Bernie shirt to their concert.
To what
Nice.
concert?
Pussy Riot's coming to Berkeley.
Oh, wow, cool. Oh, I would totally go. That sounds great.
It's
That'd be
badass.
amazing.
I may have it kind of depends on what happens, but I may have scored tickets for Rage Against the Machine, as well as Run the Jewels, who are opening for them later
Oh
this
my
year.
god.
Uh huh.
I saw them at Woodstock '99, absolutely totally changed my life. I was a big fan of theirs growing up in like the budding internet age when I didn't really know what was going on. As Emily and I have discussed, I had like Zapatista quotes in my senior quote graduation, but really
You were that
didn't know
dude.
what I just knew I was rebelling against something, and went on the budding website, but saw them in 99. That was amazing. And then I saw them at Rock the Bells in 07, co-headlining with Wu-Tang Clan at Randall's Island
Nice.
or whatever, or
I think I saw them in Randall's Island in 1996 or 1995.
oh wow, that was probably
They were at
awesome.
the small stage of Lollapalooza that year. I think it was the
Oof,
third or fourth
That's
year.
crazy.
such a great band.
I'm old.
Ah,
I've just
that's
dated
that. No,
myself
that's
on that
awesome.
program.
No,
Yeah,
that's
but
cool
run
though.
back
That
to what you were saying about just kind of the aesthetic of Bernie, especially in
Mm.
2016 and
yeah,
continuing now. Like, I mean, that's so right on the money because the difference between even just superficially going from a Bernie rally to a rally for another candidate is you saw so many more, just this explosion of creative, organic, homemade, um, just creativity and evidence at Bernie rallies with all of the homemade signs and just people coming
Mm-hmm.
up with all this wild stuff. And then, just some of the other candidates, you'd see more kind of mass produced signs, a very
yeah,
slick, cohesive, consistent, branded kind of feel. And yeah, you don't see
yeah.
murals spontaneously popping up in cities for these other candidates the way you do for Bernie. And especially now that I'm like traveling the country and seeing rallies taking place around the country, even ones that I'm helping to throw, um, just again like
Mm-hmm.
the individual kind of local flavor that they take on from locale to locale. One thing people have
Absolutely.
begun doing is creating letters, spelling out Bernie, but they're doing it in a way that is specific to the place. Like the LA ones kind of got famous; they were very iconic with the palm trees in them. But my crew in Austin, the Texans for Bernie people, they just got done making some, and they worked really hard coming up with things that each letter stood for. So they've got the blue bonnets, which are very Texas, in the
Yeah.
B. Um, if I recall, I think they went with like NASA or something for the N, but it's all very Texas themed. Um,
That's
and
awesome.
yeah, so just seeing like different versions of things that are very indicative of the particular the place and the culture, and as you go from place to place,
Yeah, and I think it's why
it's
it's so
so
important for
obvious the difference.
yeah.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and the campaign is able to put things out that are like sort of containers to catch those things, you know? So
Yeah,
like they can have sort of these broad kind of what you think of as being slightly boring even logos and design constraints, but it actually makes a really excellent container to hold all of this different just cornucopia of
yeah, it sort of serves as like a template or a springboard, but then it gets customized,
yeah.
and you wind up with something that's this like unique kind of synthesis of the consistent Bernie, logo or branding, but then with a unique twist on it.
And this is
It's
like
really cool to see people come up with this.
what a Run's videography class kind of thing that he did for the Bernie campaign in 2016 was. I went to
Mm.
the Ithaca, New York stop, the filmmakers workshop or some whatever it was called, and I had absolutely no experience. I like had a Mac for a couple years and wanted to kind of mess around and make something other than just videos of my cats. And then I went to this thing, and he gave a talk on how we could use campaign resources. Like we could go ahead and
Mm.
help ourselves to
This
these
is
clips of
important, yeah.
video, and we
Yeah.
could use the logo in circumstances, whatever it was, and gave us tips on how to keep it
Well, we
local and keep
actually
it.
had a whole Vimeo channel that we would just keep so people could download things easier.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
nice.
There was this idea of replating content, and you had these hunks of we were using. Iran used this sushi and sashimi, I think, example of,
Mm-hmm.
here are the hunks of meat. You arrange them as you please.
Or
Add
serve
a
it
local
plain.
flavor. Yeah, make local people care about it. Here's how you do that. Here are some artistic tips.
Right.
Here are some technical tips. Here are some logistical tips. Now go forth and make film. And it
And
was like,
the point is to get good stuff. The point is not that you're getting free or cheap stuff, because to get that, we actually had an extra person on the road who would just edit every single thing Bernie said, would cut every single event into like 5 or 6 chunks based on topics, and just
yeah.
put it in this
Nice.
Vimeo.
Right.
So like if
So
you
that
were
folks could
into
draw from it.
disability rights, you could just look up disability and get like 7 clips of Bernie talking about it at length, so you can make your
Which is
video.
great. Super valuable for
See, I wish
That's
I
an
wish I'd
artistic
known this all
movement.
existed. Here I am ripping stuff from YouTube and chopping it up myself when I'm trying to make stuff. I
Oh
didn't
my
know this
god, like an
existed.
animal.
I
Yeah.
still engage in those animalistic practices from time to time, but yes, no, totally. There's a better way, and well, now we're all connected. That's great. It's funny how we all sort of had our own. We've all had our own paths coming to this. Lily, too young to vote in 2016. Myself, a formerly disenfranchised voter and someone who was fascinated in politics growing up and then gave up. And Emily, who had her own path to activism through Bernie, and Arun, who became involved through Obama. Which is a nice little spectrum of folks we have here. On that note, Lily, did you have one more question for
Yeah,
Arun
this
before?
one's more of a little fun question. I brought this up with you guys last time, and Emily saw this when we were in Iowa. This goofy little group that supports Biden, Gen X punks for Biden, tried
nice.
to host an event called Biden's Punk as Fuck. And I want to know, do you think Biden is punk rock?
I
No one
think
showed up to this event, by the way.
I
Zero people.
think that Biden is kind of punk rock.
Really?
I
Oof.
do. I do, but you have to understand, like, I do believe punk rock is a fairly big tent thing, of
Oh, yeah.
which there are things going on in which I do not approve. You know what I mean?
Okay.
We have a big enough tent to have, crusty
Did you
and
want to
hardcore and
substantiate those
Holstein together.
claims?
Okay, is Biden a crust punk?
So
I'm trying to imagine the corner of the tent where Biden is under the tent.
I think
And I'm sure it can
Biden
exist.
Biden is coming across this time like he's like the new singer of the Casualties. You're the new singer of the Casualties. And he's just,
Hey, I saw the Casualties with the new guy a few years ago.
and the
It
new guy's probably not that young, right? The new guy's also old.
I mean,
Maybe that's a bad example.
So
How about the UK sub? Let's say the UK subs.
UK sub, okay.
Yeah, he's coming across like he's singing for the UK subs. I do think that guy, I think his name's Charlie, and I think he actually had a heart attack and he might be dead. But
Oh God.
but those guys are still punk as fuck, right? They have no business doing what they're doing. They need to retire now. They are not the kings of the scene. They're not supposed to be in charge, but are they punk rock? Yeah, they're punk rock.
Okay, sure. In a not me us, I'm still fighting for your healthcare kind of way. I can
They're
see
not
that.
going to close the show anymore. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to complain.
Please God, no.
They're going to complain that the band from Sweden headlined. Like they're going to be angry about all of those things.
Yeah, but I feel like they're the only reason they're still punk as fuck is because they have a past of being punk, and I'm waiting for that to be
a different aesthetic. Okay, like you are a
like, where's the analogy to that for
punk.
Biden?
You're a younger person who's into punk. You probably don't have very much ideologically in line with the Sex Pistols. One of like
You'd be
the
surprised. Well, are they though, or were they
they're
a
like
manufactured attempt
very
to
conservative. Their politics are very conservative.
Well, they are
used to
now.
think that,
No, they were then too.
But that's because they never had a
reacting
consistent political ideology in the
liberalism.
first place. They were a manufactured kind of astroturfed attempt to take advantage of the punk vibe.
They were made
And
to
sell
shut
clothing.
people out of a safe, idea of what Great Britain was. And a lot of that was mocking the liberal institutions of Europe.
Well, that was the idea of it, but the entire thing was
Like the Clash
a
took a very
package that
opposite
was
take.
put together and meant to be sold to the public once a market had been identified. They weren't really like an
but they're drilling down on
organic-
what's sticky, right? And so what's sticky,
Yeah.
the cell units is this sort of weird concoction of rebellion, but with a kind of conservative value to it. While the Clash are obviously actually actively promoting
Yes.
progressive ideas through their music.
Right.
I'm not even saying one is better than the other. Obviously, I think both of us have an opinion on that, but we don't have to
All right, if we're gonna
Right.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't really have I don't have a dog in this fight because I actually like the music and I listen to it. But I can still acknowledge that they weren't really punk. When you have a bass player who can't play any bass and has basically just been sourced because he's a good face for the band.
He didn't
You
even
know.
play the instrument. He's just up there making it happen. He's like Napoleon, you know? Like
Yeah,
it's
but he was
amazing.
like literally spotted to play a role. They were like, "Oh, this kid will help us sell this image that we're trying to put
But
out
then didn't
here."
give a crap.
But
I
who
don't know.
was
Punk's just
actually
what they
behind the
were.
wheel? A bunch of adults who were trying to make money. That's not very punk.
I feel like you could tell a kinder story, which is that this thing was created and sort of escaped its control and created an entire kind of aesthetic revolution, you know?
There's probably a case to be made for that, sure. I will say this, okay? Like this is where my personal history comes in. My parents met on the streets of LA. They were punks. They wound up falling in with a man who was a fashion designer from London, Jim O'Connor, and he started a store on Melrose in the 80s called Poseur. And his whole point was the punk scene gets criticized, or participants in the punk scene get criticized who aren't seen as authentic. They're not about the idea or the politics. They're just there because they like showing up and being part of a scene and wearing certain clothes, etc. They're in for the aesthetic. And his
Yeah.
argument was that's just as legitimate. So that was the sort of the
Yeah.
ethos of his store. And
I guess I come down with that. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I understand that. Apparently I used to run around the store in a little walker when I was a toddler. So
Aw.
yeah,
That sounds
before they
adorable.
All right, so if
banned
each
those things.
candidate was a punk genre, like subgenre, what would they be? Because I feel like Bloomberg is gonna be on like the bad skinheads, like the skinheads that we don't like. Weird.
Oh,
Disappointed.
is that right? Or is he like
The
some
ones that sharp kick the
super
asses
blah
of and
blah
throw out.
blah, like Southern California, like processed punk band?
Oh, like Bloomberg's trying to be punk.
Oh, right.
Fashion. He's
Like
the
Bloomberg's like Pennywise or something, or
oh my
you know.
god. I
I can see that.
concert when I
But
was
maybe y'all are right. Maybe it's like totally like just crypto horrible.
no, I think Pete's trying to be the fashion punk. He's
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to
That tracks.
no one wants him
Yeah.
there. He's like that one kid that's at the concert.
He's like the one kid who's insisting Blink 182 is kind of a punk band if you listen to the early stuff.
He's the kid that hangs out at Hot Topic and bought the knockoff docks that are made in China and they aren't broken in properly. And
Can we just actually say, even while we're going through this exercise, that like every politician says that they're cooler than they are, and you look up their stuff, and that like Beto, he's like, I was a punk. You're like, yeah, you kind of were. Like all this stuff.
Yeah.
Andrew Yang, legitimately goth. When you like look up his stuff, you're like, oh, you were.
Yeah, I've
actually
seen the
a goth
photos.
human being. You remind me
Yeah.
of goth human beings who are our age. He's my age, I think.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like he's definitely.
Yeah, he and
was
Pete
walking
were
the
definitely living different lives
And
around the turn of the century.
Like, one of the bands that your mom is okay with you listening to. She doesn't want you to play all the crazy stuff in the car.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually talking about this the other day, and like, I am solidly Gen X, and so our parents are baby boomers. And like, it was hard to offend them with punk music because they all thought they'd seen it all, and the '60s were so great, like whatever. And the one that would always cut
Right.
through was the Dead Kennedys. Just the name would set them off. They'd be like,
Oh,
"That's not
yeah.
funny."
Oh,
And you'd
yeah.
be like, kind of is.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they'd be like, no, that's not funny. And I actually feel like the cultural shifts in the country, especially post September 11th, kind of, have like diminished irony to the point where like once again, it's sort of like that name is like super edgy.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've kind of looped
And the
back
logo
around.
is so
Like a Sex
the logo
Pistols. You're
is
like,
so
ooh,
basic
shock me. You know what I mean? But like,
geometrical
but then you're like, ooh, that's kind of yikes. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Definitely a killer brand.
When
of
I
the punk
first
rock
started
world.
going to shows when I was 11, 12, and my mom would take me and she would sit in the back and watch me like get into mosh pits and everything. I would never play any music in the car with her, but I think she kind of got used to it, like going to these shows and like the shock value of like
Totally.
names like the Dead Kennedys, or I
Yeah.
think we had one like in Tulsa's called Gutter Villain, like these like shock value names kind of just diminished
Mhm.
over
Gutter
time
Villain.
until she was like, okay, my daughter is not going to grow out of this.
It also changed though.
Yeah.
Like, I remember before September 11th, there were like bands that had crazy names, that you just wouldn't do anymore. Like there was the McVeighs, and they were actually pretty good. And there was Corky's Extra Chromosome, and they were actually okay. And there was just like ran the gamut from being very violent to being very offensive.
Yeah.
And both kind of, and so I would say that in that way, September 11th was terrible for punk. But it was on the flip side, really good for horror movies, which then stopped being ironic, which was annoying, and it started actually being
Yeah.
scary again, which is fun. You're like, oh yeah, I wanted a scary movie. I didn't want a movie about scary movies and about why they're dumb.
Yeah.
I'm sure
right.
someone out there somewhere has done a documentary on how, like, what the different, the popular horror genres say about our cultural fears, by
Oh, it's
generation
definitely
or something
cultural
like that.
trauma,
But
right? And it takes a while.
yeah,
So like,
uh-huh.
I think I don't remember when the first Godzilla comes out, but it's like Japan needs at least 15 years to kind of process their trauma before coming up with
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Godzilla. Yeah. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, look, this is an American perspective. I think the Vietnamese think of it as being a bigger tragedy for different reasons. But it took America about 15, 16, 20 years to actually come up with like the Deer Hunter and other movies that took sort of Vietnam more seriously and not
Yeah.
just like a weird kind of cartoon backdrop. So I think these things
Right.
do take a while for like countries to get right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Very, very true. Lily, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah,
We're
for
gonna
Yeah, nice to meet you.
cut you loose, release you back into the wild. Thanks so much, as always, for being on the show. And we will bring you on again very soon to discuss some new plethora of interesting, fun topics. Thank
Yep.
you
That is
so
not
much.
the way the word plethora is used. I'm just coming out.
I wasn't gonna say anything,
I'm
but
terrible at
since he
this.
did,
You
If
know
you
it's
what?
use
okay.
a word like plethora, you better land it.
Doesn't it mean like a wide array, a wide arrangement of
There are a
things, a
plethora of
variety of
things
things?
wrong with what you are saying right now.
See, no. So did you use it correctly there?
I did.
See, I felt we used it the same way, so therein is the misunderstanding. I don't have the understanding of language.
Just
Certainly not the
substitute
mastery of language.
cornucopia, and we'll call it even.
Because
Which we have
Arun
said
and Emily,
tonight.
you two are both so well spoken, and I mean Lily, you two please don't take that the wrong way. But yeah, I would love to have you two teach me about language. For what's funny, Run is actually Doug has corrected a few bad grammatical habits of mine. So
Doug is an
please.
organized thinker. He is a good
He
writer.
absolutely is. So
Yeah.
please call me out because y'all make me a better, a somewhat better, still very
What's
bad
terrible
podcast hoster.
is like the thing that I think you get better at doing the job, at least that I do, is you get better at coming up with better ways to say nothing. Or people like,
Yeah.
people just feel it's satisfying,
We-
but it didn't
we
take you
live in a
anywhere because it's the
society.
safest thing to do. And
Sure.
it's sort of sad,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's yep. Noted.
How
Absolutely.
many ways can Pete talk about polarization in the debate without actually talking about polarization?
Yeah, like Pete's really good at this, right?
I
But
think
at least,
it's
yeah,
about-
he's great. He's good at it.
I think
I
he
need to learn.
polarized like 7 times in like just the last half of the debate. Like,
We live in a
Well,
society.
we've all had that thing of where we learn a new word and we can't stop inserting it into conversations, and
Well,
Totally.
now, see, that's not the thing. That my fear is I've been using plethora incorrectly, not wrong.
A plethora.
For
now this is
several
what you'll be
years.
tking about at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep.
Yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
several years ago, a good friend of myself and some of my other friends, a fight broke out over the correct usage of the word abscond, and then none of us could
He
stop using it.
absconded with the treasure.
See, you're using it the way I always used it. I assumed it could only be used in the context where it's immediately followed by with, as in it's basically synonym for stole. But no, apparently you can just abscond.
Yes.
Period. You don't actually have to abscond with something.
Well, what
I
I
happens
was
to
very
you
disappointed by this.
when you just abscond? What do?
You
You leave?
vamoose, escape. I don't know. Yeah, but it's
Plethora-
not the accompanying item with which you have absconded is not in fact essential to
Unlike
absconding.
this example, Stephen, with your example, we have a cultural touch point for you to watch after we're done recording this podcast, which is you will go watch Three Amigos, and they actually have a scene where they discuss plethora, the exact
Okay.
definition, how to use it, and then someone uses it incorrectly and is called out.
Oh no! Oh great! Is
Yeah,
this
yeah.
a
So
Steve
there's
Martin
a whole
film?
scene.
Right?
I bet you it's on YouTube. Just plethora and Three Amigos.
Three Amigos. Is that Steve Martin, or am I remembering
That is
incorrectly?
Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Chevy Chase. Those are all.
There
three
is a trio, my
It's
man.
quite a film, actually.
Wow.
Wow, I
Yeah.
love it.
It's quite a film, and I'd recommend it highly to both of you.
You know, my uncle watched it once when I was a kid, and I didn't. I was like, oh, that sounds like something I'm not really interested in. I was very young, man. I'll have to
Yeah,
check it out. That sounds cool. I'll definitely watch the plethora scene because I've Googled it since, and now it's saying, and I am getting a much different sense. Google is, of course, saying it's like an excessive, it's too much. It's not just a variety. It's like too much of something. So I have a lot of deep, deep thinking to do. But Again, Lily, we've lost her. I think I don't know if technology is
She's gone.
brought her off the call or if she just hung up. But either way, it was great to have her. We're
We
gonna
will
wrap
remember
up.
her.
We're gonna wrap up the call here. I just wanted to know if before we closed, either of you or both of you had any thoughts or reflections you wanted to put forth about where we are with the Bernie 2020 movement. We've all obviously been invested in different ways. And if I had to make such a statement, I would just say that I'm really, really excited about where we stand. Having won the first 3 big popular votes, that's an unprecedented feat on itself. And just the momentum we seem to be carrying, being on the ground in primary states, knocking doors, has been tremendous and inspiring. And I'm excited to do it again in a few days with another internet friend of ours, Megan, who will be joining me to go to Massachusetts, meeting up with my buddy Steve from high school, and we're going to go knock a bunch of doors. Either way, I just feel like we're in a good position. But I think the front runner syndrome, could set in at any time. I think criticisms are being lobbed at us disproportionately more now, and they're getting a little bit more creative, and more mainstream
They're
people are
all
picking them up.
gearing up. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's up? What do you guys think? As sort of
Look,
a quick,
you're right.
little sign off discussion. Where are we
We're,
at?
we're running. We're going to start running into headwinds. It's going to make everything harder. Every
Yep.
new percentage point Bernie picks up is going to be harder and harder to get, especially for
Yes.
the campaign. And there's things campaigns can do, and there's things campaigns aren't good at. And we spend a lot of time, especially folks who aren't on the campaign, ruminating what the campaign is doing, on what the
Sure.
campaign is doing right and what they're doing wrong. And instead, we should be ruminating on what we are doing right and what we are doing wrong, because there
Yes.
are things that the campaign is effective at doing at mobilizing mass numbers of people, putting them in front of cameras so that we can film them at events that Emily's helping
Hmm.
put on and helping getting people
Yep.
there. And that's amazing. But
Yep.
you, the listener, the non-campaign person, are uniquely equipped to talk to normal people, especially
Yeah.
people who, again, we talked about this before, don't feel like they're part of the team, don't really want the team aesthetic, aren't looking to get involved in the sport. But if
Right.
you can convince 5, 6 of them, each of us can convince 5 or 6 people who are on the fence about voting to begin with to vote, that's going to make up a margin of difference. That's going to make this election. Look, we're the anti-establishment candidate. Every decision, every tie is going to go against us.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
you want to build up a layer of fat against the cold.
You
And that
have to.
layer of fat is me, it's you, it's everyone who knows anyone who is not on this campaign. So let's
Yeah.
all
Yeah,
campaign
it's that
adjacent people to
buffer
be
that
proud.
is so essential because, as we saw, we were polling very strong in Iowa, polling very strong in New Hampshire. The actual results were much closer, and that's something we have to be figured. Like you're saying, yeah, we have an uphill battle ahead of us. It's our race to lose, essentially, which means we have to be, allowing for a buffer in order to ensure that we continue to come out on top. And in fact, go into the convention with that coveted majority of delegates. And like just with what you were saying right there about, just if the average person manages to sway 5 or 6 people, the equivalent of that kind of efficacy and reach in terms of man hours and money and energy spent by the
Totally.
campaign
Can you
to
imagine?
get the same result is astronomical. And it's
Yeah.
so, and especially, when you're reaching out to people in your own community, you know these people. You know what their lives look like, more or less. You're in the same boat with them. They know you. There's some trust there. They are more likely to listen to you than they are likely to listen to a polished, even the best pitch, the most tested, pitch that we can come up with.
Totally.
Um, is not going to be as effective as a real
Your
person who,
clumsy pitch is
you
way
saw their
better.
family grow up. Yeah. You
Yeah.
saw their family grow up. They're in this, they have the same struggles. They live in the same economy as you. If they're convinced and they're passionate, that says something. And it's something that, we can pour so much energy and money into on our end and maybe not, have the same amount of just sheer clout with ordinary people on the ground. So that is absolutely invaluable
Yeah.
for ordinary people.
One of the coolest points about the results from Nevada that I saw was that apparently a lot of the Hispanic vote was largely influenced by the fact that younger folks in Hispanic families where English is not the native language
Yep. It bubbled
necessarily
up.
Yes.
serve as
Yes.
translators. They serve as cultural translators, and they sort of serve as, interpreters of everything, the news, the culture.
Hmm.
And I think that's a huge bump when you have young people sort of describing to their
Yeah.
families these issues, especially folks who
Bernie
have
just kind of seems
been.
to want you to have insulin, and they're like, okay, I kind of like Bernie.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that seems
Well,
neat.
not
Yeah,
only that, but I think,
exactly,
we saw the
exactly.
media kind of try to spin that, they picked up on that was kind of how we were able to reach so much of the Latino vote. And they tried to kind of put a little bit of spin on it and say, well, maybe it's that, these older generations are relying on their grandsons or children to, um, translate for them, almost
Yeah,
kind of implying that, we were able to pull one over on the older generation
right. That
by
it's not inspiration; it's a
manipulating that. But
reliance.
but I
Right.
see something very different when I look at that. When I think about um, you know, the culture in Latino communities, it's very tightly knit. Family is paramount, and for those families, to look at their the younger members of their family and to see like that's the brightest hopes for their futures. Um,
Yeah.
they're looking at their children and their grandchildren and they're seeing the result of everything that they've sacrificed for. And so it means a lot
Yeah.
when those kids or those young adults are telling them, this is what matters to me, this is my future. And so it's those really tightly knit bonds in communities like that I feel is much more that's what we're seeing in play when you see the older generations kind of listen to what they're telling them and become more favorable to Bernie. Um,
Yeah.
Definitely not so much some nonsense about just not knowing what's going on and relying on them for information. But it's
That's a
a really
somewhat
beautiful thing to
universal.
see. This like intergeneration. It's what Bernie keeps saying. We're building a multiracial, multi-generational movement, and
Yeah.
that's so important. And as we see him begin to cut
Absolutely.
into not just the younger bracket, which he had very definitely in 2016, but beginning to push that ceiling upward in terms of age, um, to the point now where I want to say the cutoff line was like everything under 60 or 65. I
65.
saw a
Yeah.
recent poll. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's
The
a
only
lot
Young
older
demographic.
people.
than we
Young
had last
people.
time around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is. It's neat. I think it's very inspiring what the movement is doing right now. And
Look, you heard Dick Van Dyke. Like Bernie might be a young man, but we
yeah,
should still give him a
I
chance.
love that guy.
He's
Yeah.
he's
amazing. I am so excited that this campaign got to reintroduce young people to Dick Van Dyke over because he's like the best and the
I
coolest.
love
And
Dick
really,
Van Dyke.
like,
absolutely.
no, I know. And everybody's like, oh, wait a minute, he's the Mary Pop, and everyone just gets so excited about it. And then
No, Dick Van
when
Dyke's
people are in
awesome.
politics, yeah, he's the
Maybe
best.
I'm just weird, but we had the whole DVD set of the Dick Van Dyke Show. We love Dick Van Dyke.
No, you are clearly a fan. It's just
Never
a
mind,
lot of
I was
people.
weird. I was homeschooled. There you
Oh,
go.
that's a whole different topic for a whole different episode.
Oh, that's
That's like
that's
a
at least
cliffhanger.
three,
It's like a
four
cliffhanger
episodes.
ending.
Yeah, it is.
Next week.
It
Oh my
is.
gosh. Thank you so much, both of y'all, for being here and staying up late to do this podcast.
No, it's my pleasure.
It's been absolutely great to just chat. I wish we got a chance to do this more often, the three of us. Y'all are great. And Lily, thank you so much, Lily Violet, co-admin of the Bernie Sanders Dank Meme Stash, hardworking college student, hardworking activist, and organizer for Bernie. She's wonderful, and we thank her so much for being on. Arun, thank you for being our guest.
Absolutely. My
And
pleasure.
Yeah, it
Emily,
was
thank you
wonderful getting to
for.
talk to you.
Yeah, yes, it was indeed. I think and thanks so much for Emily for, as always, co-hosting with me here. And I really don't want to find the day where we don't do an episode together. I'm going to try to track you down no matter where you are on the road with the campaign and try to get you to join in on these calls. But in the next
I
episode,
will make every attempt. I can't I
we
can't make any promises. It's pretty crazy, but
I'm
now
going
and
to just
then.
use basic tactics of persistence, repetition, and simple old-fashioned peer pressure to try to lure you into continuing to come on and talk. Because next time we do have a pair of guests who are going to be great. These are some I'm going to keep it a surprise, but some very, very cool, brilliant, talented, capable folks who have incredibly bright futures ahead of them are going to be our guests on either the next episode or the following. But thanks again, everybody who's tuned in. Thanks for joining us. You can subscribe at Burn After Listening, BERN, on Apple and Spotify, and anywhere else you want to have your podcast delivered. Shoot us an email, burnafterlistening@gmail.com. Arun, Emily, thanks so much. We're going to take y'all out with another clip from Run's band, iFarm. totally rad. Check them out. You can get snippets of their stuff all over the internet. Maybe not legally. Sorry, Ron, but go check them out. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
The restless ruler of Ithaca.